topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good morning, listeners. This is Divya, and super excited to be here with you. So I want to take a moment and thank each and every one of you who got our books, because the partial profits from our books go to kiva.org. And I am honored to say that we have helped now over 80 authors across the globe. I'm talking about authors, 80 entrepreneurs across the globe. I know it's a tiny bit. Here's the thing, every drop, every person impacted matters. And when you get a chance, take 1 hour of your time and help somebody every month. And think of the magnitude. Even if 100 million people just in the US alone do that, that's 100 million hours in a month, folks. We can turn things around. So thank you for joining us, and let's welcome our guest, Dr. Mary Mitchell. Welcome, Mary.
Good morning, Divya. Good to be here with you.
Good morning. So, Mary, tell us if you recall any moment from your childhood that stands out even today for you.
You know, I have listened to your shows and I'm prepared. Absolutely. You know, my father died when I was 10, and my mother had to go to work and raise 2 teenagers. And she was always so darn positive, no matter what. And when I was a teenager, I read that book, The Power of Positive Thinking, and I thought, that's my mom. And so I've used that and those principles throughout my life. And I've always had good jobs, and I've always had more income. And now I teach it. And so it's just part of me, and I thank her for that.
Of course. And so many of us don't realize it. When you are children, your parents become your role models. And of course, most of us kind of feel disappointed. And rather than feeling disappointed in them, just kind of looking at them as human beings and that they did the best they could. And that allows for stronger relationships, because I know so many of my clients having such a tough time with their parents, and parents having tough time with their children. If we just take a look at each other as human beings, meet people where they're at, without any judgments, life would be so beautiful.
You know, when my brother and I were growing up, it was a struggle for her. And we had a milkman at that time. And every time the milkman came, we could get some chocolate milk. And every time the bread man came, we could get a cupcake. And that, we were so rich. I mean, my brother and I felt rich the whole time.
It's the love, it's the space,
Yeah.
and the environment we create. So, Mary, as you continued your journey in life, where did your interest take you?
Well, very interesting. My mother always said, be a secretary because you'll always be able to get a job. So I said, okay, I'll be a secretary. So I worked for a lumber yard, and the owner of this lumber yard was one of the most difficult people I've ever met in my life. And he had like 15 people in the office, and in a year and a half, 11 of them quit. And every time they did, I'd say, I'll do their job. I'll do their job. And so I worked my way up, and then I thought, you know, I want my own lumber yard. And I realized I needed to go to college. And so I went to Ohio State University, and I have a degree in sawmill management. And then I was hired immediately by a large corporation in Puget Sound, and found myself working with sawmills, buying material from sawmills for the pulp and paper industry. And it was an extremely challenging career, but a positive attitude no matter what. And I was very successful. And from that, I did that for 10 years. And then a company in California was looking across the nation to find someone to buy wood for a wood-fired power plant that they were building. And someone told me about it, and I interviewed for it and got it. And I did that for 10 years. And that plant used 100.
So,
Go
if I
ahead.
may interject, Mary, let's kind of go back to your first job. You
Okay.
said that you found challenges, that it was a difficult job. So, share with us what challenges were that and how did you overcome?
Okay, great. Because when you're working for pulp mills, they have a world market and it's very volatile. They ship their material all over the world. When you're working for sawmills in working with sawmills in Puget Sound, they're exporting a lot of their material to other countries. So it's a volatile marketplace. One's up, one's down. And so when the sawmills were shut down or curtailed, I was responsible for 400 people at the pulp mills. And so I had
Mm.
to find very creative ways to get the wood supply to keep those mills running. And when they say never make an enemy in the business, they mean it, because that person may be just who you need when things are tough.
Oh, what a powerful statement, that you just can't make enemies. And as the saying goes, right? Never burn your bridges.
That's right.
So, a lot of people have some knowledge about different industries, and like for pulp and sawmills that you're talking about, including myself, I think so. A lot of our audience might not know about it. So, can you give us a peek about just a little overview of the industry?
Sure, sure. So I worked for 2 mills in Puget Sound, and one made pulp. That means they take all the wood, mush it up with water, make a mat out of it, and they cut it up in squares and sell it to other mills, who then add water and make their product. The other mill I worked for made newsprint. And newsprint is, it takes a very special, it took spruce. You couldn't use any other fiber because the spruce fibers came together very well. And, newspaper, it's easy to make problems with that. So anyway, so I had to find spruce chips for that mill. And so then I looked at the sawmills in Puget Sound and British Columbia, because every mill uses a different species and makes a different product. So I had to find the right sawmill to get the right fiber for the right pulp mill. At Port Townsend, we use cedar and Doug fir, and then at Port Angeles, we use spruce. So you had to find the right species. Then you had to buy them, and usually that means contracting. And so you're negotiating with, I had over 100 different suppliers, and you're negotiating. But the interesting thing is, because they're world markets, I had to renegotiate the price every 3 months. So I was constantly negotiating. So I had
Absolutely.
to
So,
know the lumber, I had to know how many logs the sawmills had in their inventory, how they were selling their product, where where were the barges to bring the product to the pulp mills. I had to negotiate transportation, rail, barge, truck. Um, I had to know what the competition was doing at the other pulp mills. What was their inventory? Were they desperate or were they plentiful? So all of these things worked against the price. And so I was constantly looking at all the aspects of that. And that's why my number one tip in my booklet is, you have to know your market intimately, all about it. Were the Russians buying or not? Was China buying or not? And what were they paying? And so it was very complex. And that was very challenging, because if you didn't investigate the whole thing, you wouldn't even know what the price should be.
Yeah, definitely. Because, Mary, what you shared was that knowing your market, and we'll kind of come to that. That said, we all use paper day in and day out, from toilet papers to paper towels to napkins to writing notebooks. Paper is part of our lives, and I don't know what we would do without it. And I didn't even know that in different products you have different fibers.
Yes. Yeah, and we even had a bag plant at Port Townsend where they made paper bags. So they would run off that type of paper and then take it to the warehouse and make bags out of it. And so
Hmm,
it's very interesting. And when you think of Bible paper, how thin that is, oh my gosh, it takes the right mix, it takes the right amount of water, how you dry it. It's a fascinating industry.
absolutely. And from what you shared with me, I think so. I've kind of hit upon the secret sauce. You can tell me if it's something else. What you shared was that while you were in your first job, you said whenever somebody quit, oh, let me do their job. When somebody else quit, oh, let me do their job. And then that's how you learned the ins and outs of the whole industry. Would that be a fair statement?
Of the wood products industry because it was a wholesale lumber company. I didn't know
Yeah,
anything about pulp and paper, but that's why I was hired to work with sawmills.
got it, got it. Yeah, and it pays to sometimes get to know different aspects of your industry. So, as you talked about, you moved in different places and you figured out your market. And so, when you moved to your second company, did you face any challenges or was that?
Oh, definitely. After the pulp and paper industry, like I said, a Southern California company was building a wood-fired power plant here in Northern California, and it would take 100 semi truckloads a day of wood waste, 7 days a week. The plant wasn't even constructed, and the company didn't know how you go about buying this wood. So they went on this national hunt and found me, and I was getting a divorce at the time, and I was ready to get out of town. And I had 9 months to figure it out, and there was no piles of wood laying around, so I had to negotiate and purchase fiber away from other wood-fired power plants. So I was not the welcome kid in town, but I did. I did it, and we had plenty of wood, and it was fun. Actually, it was really fun. Then the other interesting thing was the company that promised this wood that I had to find realized that if I couldn't do it, they would pay horrendous penalties. And so my major negotiation was to negotiate out of this contract.
Tell us about that. Like, and what principles did you use in that negotiation?
Well, I had to be so confident in myself that I was going to negotiate my way out of a job that paid extremely well. And so I had to be confident enough that that was okay. And I kept saying to myself, is this the right thing to do? Absolutely. And so I kept showing the power plant people, this is not in your best interest, but I'll share what I think is in your best interest. And I will give you advice on how you can succeed even without me. So it was being helpful, being positive, telling them what they can do. And in the end, they were happy to terminate the contract. And then they hired me to take the job because they knew I knew how to do it.
Right. And what it shows is that you're not just kind of abandoning people like, hey, this doesn't work out for me. I'm going to not honor the contract. You're giving them the solutions.
Yes, yes. And that to me is being a good person when you're doing that because you don't want everyone ever make enemies. You don't ever want, people call me even today. Hey, I've got this issue in business. What do I do about it? And because they know I'm going to be honest with them and I'm not going to do anything that would impede their ability to succeed.
Yeah. And it's amazing how everything goes back to the human values. It's
Yes.
about caring for others, being in integrity, being honest. And so many times we kind of forget about it, and the reminder is needed. So, share with us some of the negotiating principles that you have learned that our audience can take and implement it in their lives straight away.
Well, I wrote this booklet, and it's because at one point I had to hire a log buyer. I didn't know anything about buying logs. He worked as a log buyer for a company, so I hired him away, and I thought he's going to be great, and he was a disaster. And I realized he didn't know what I had learned about negotiation. So I got out my paper and pen, and I thought, how did I learn this? And I came up with the top 10 tips for negotiation, and it just seemed so simple. I called it the plain vanilla approach to negotiation. And he really took it to heart, and he immediately started having success. And so that's what I'd like to offer your listeners. And of course, the first one is whenever you're negotiating, whether you're buying a house, a car, anything, know the market intimately. What's the competition doing? What are the other people that are trying to buy the same thing that you are? What's going on with all that? And hours spent in that is like gold when you come to the negotiation. And then number two, recognize that whoever you're negotiating with is doing this in their best interest, not yours. And that's important to know. And then always be reliable and consistent. Because if you're not, it means you're not prepared. And if the other person's not reliable and consistent, then you got a little edge there because they're probably not prepared. And out of respect, always be on time. And I found in business, people would keep me waiting, and I would just go, I think I'll just read for now. It's okay. They're not going to intimidate me. And so always be on time shows respect, and people appreciate that. And sometimes when you go into someone's office, for whatever reason you're negotiating, their office often shows who they are. Now, I've walked into an office that had every animal head you could imagine on the walls. And this gentleman proceeded to sit me on a couch that was about 6 inches lower than him. And he thought he had me intimidated. I ignored it all. I said, okay, let's get to business. I ignored it, and he didn't know what to do because he was not prepared. He thought he could intimidate me. And so I find that fascinating. And sometimes in the timber industry, it's a little bit of the male ego. And this woman coming in here that you don't really know. And so that was always fascinating. I've walked into an office that had pictures of fish this person caught all over the world. My friend who needed to know negotiation goes immediately to the pictures and goes, oh, where's this? I said, sit down. We're not going there. I could care less about their ego wall. I want to negotiate. So people that expect you to admire them greatly aren't prepared. And so that's another thing to really learn about. Sometimes they want to talk a lot and tell you all the good things that they've done. I just say, I've only got so much time. Here's what I need to do. So I'm respectful. I ignore any power plays, and I get down to business, and I'm nice. And I think that's the most important thing when you're dealing with any negotiation.
Absolutely.
Smile a lot.
And we'll come back to negotiation again. Let's go back to your journey. So from what you're telling me, we were on to your third company. Was it pretty much like a male dominated field, or did you have any other women in that industry?
In that wood fiber industry, it's really a West Coast wood basket. The wood and lumber and pulp and paper move up and down. And there were, I would say, 50 to 60 wood fiber supply positions that bought and sold this wood fiber. And there was me and one other woman, Debbie. And so they thought we were, the company threw a bone to me to get a woman in that job. They didn't realize that I had some smarts, So I had to prove that and prove it nicely. So many people would say, why don't you go home and get married and have kids? Let's get down to business.
And so that was back then. And nowadays, like, are women interested in this industry? Are you seeing any shift in that?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. There are female sawmill managers. There are women in all aspects of the pulp and paper industry. It was an interesting time to grow up, and I just admire them all for what they're doing today. It's great.
Oh, fantastic. So let's say if any women are thinking of going in this industry because that's what, let's say there are some youngsters and that's what the industry is there in their villages or in the towns, what would you tell them?
I would say if you have an interest in forestry, nature, manufacturing, um, go for it. Go and interview people in the business because it's a fascinating business. And I love trees and I love being in the forest, but I also love paper. And so I really admire that one can take a tree and make 2x4s to build a house. And then the wood chips go to make paper that you use every day. And so I admire that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. A lot of the forests today are sustainable. And that's important too for clean air. And it's a really good industry. I just greatly admire it. And wood-fired power in California, when there was no wood-fired power, there were only, I would think, 3 pulp and paper mills, where in Puget Sound there were 12. So there were mountains of wood fiber sitting around. And then I could go mine that. I could go, get it. And people didn't know what to do. So wood-fired power serves a great purpose too.
Mm-hmm. So now that, are you okay if I ask you a tough question? I guess that's a yes.
Oh, sure.
So a lot of people may be listening and a lot of people don't realize it, right? When you're sitting there, you're using the paper, you don't think that it's coming from trees. We tend to disregard it. And I know that there are a lot of paper mills and pulp mills that are replanting the trees. Can you tell our listeners how does that work? Because there's only a limited supply of trees.
Oh, there's trees growing all the time. Most of the timber companies replant. Now, it takes time for those trees to grow. But for instance, in the South, there are plantations. They can harvest those every 15 to 20 years. It takes a lot of acreage, but that's okay. So you plant and then it grows and you harvest and plant and grow and harvest. So I admire the people that use that much land to grow trees, and it's healthy. It's healthy for the air. Now, the people in Puget Sound, of course, at one time that was all old growth, and people didn't think about that way back when. They just thought these are great big trees, and the chipper to chip up whole trees at the Port Townsend Pulp Mill, it was built in 1925, and it would take a 48-inch tree and chip the whole thing up. I mean, it was amazing. Well, now a lot of that went into lumber, and then I got the residue. So things have changed over the years.
So you would say is that people are becoming conscious and giving back what they're taking from the earth.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, society's held them accountable. So when the company I work for up in Puget Sound sold the pulp and paper mills, they also sold the timberland. And it was interesting to see it all go to different companies. Different people bought. The Germans bought Port Townsend, the Japanese bought Port Angeles, and I think it was Sir James Goldsmith, if you remember the name, bought all the timberland. And they all have different goals and ambitions, but it still comes down to healthy forests.
Mm-hmm. No, it's fascinating because we as consumers tend to forget that we are the users, and that's So many times what happens is that it's when you're for anything or when you're against anything, it's a two-edged sword. On one hand, you're a consumer, and at the same time, you want to hold the mills responsible. So, what I believe is that we all need to be responsible. That where you're using, let's say, if you could just kind of use
Well,
a one paper towel, don't go and waste it. So many times people waste it. So, that wastage could be curbed. What are your thoughts on that?
and yeah, I'm so glad that paper towels are from here down to little short sheets. But recycling is very important. And then that's a volatile market in and of itself. At times, you can sell reams of paper to Japan or other countries, and then they get overloaded, and now we can't even recycle it here. It goes into the landfill. So that's another volatile market. And um, it's a tough one because, like pulp and paper, it's worldwide.
Right. So, do you know of any solutions that have come up to work through that?
Yes, there's a few pulp mills that now use recycled paper. They just put it in vats, take truckloads of it, put it in vats, add water, mush it up, add whatever chemicals, and reuse it. And that's really good, but that's expensive. It's a lot more expensive in many
Mm.
ways. Yeah.
Okay, so it's great that we were able to touch upon the recycling and rejuvenation of the industry. So tell us about your third job and how did that go?
My current job,
Hmm.
well, I'm retired. I retired last August. I was working for the wood-fired power plant, and then there are resource conservation districts all across the country. And the one here locally, 1.7 million acres resource conservation district, they needed a new manager. They came to interview me, and I got that job. And I was the main grant writer. And so it I took that. I worked there 13 years, and I took it from 3 people to 31 employees, from $500,000 to $4 million budget a year. And it was wonderful because now I was on the conservation side. Now we got money for stream restoration, fuels reduction, all kinds of things, planted trees. It was just wonderful. And it was on the opposite side of what a lot of activists thought. You work for pulp and paper, you got to be a bad guy in the environment. No. And so I really did that it was very fulfilling, that kind of conservation work. And while I was doing that, I heard about a metaphysical philosophy, the power of positive thinking, and what you think about shows up in your life. And I started studying that. And there's actually an organization that licenses you as a minister to teach that. And I got a minister's license, and I was ordained. And after many years promoting this, I received an honorary doctorate. And so I still teach it. I still teach 2 classes a week on the power of decision, the power of positive thinking. You can change your life. And it's a whole array of classes. And so I think about how, as a teenager, I heard this. And now, as a retired person, I'm teaching it. And it's just a nice circle.
Well, that's fascinating because it's important that you're giving back, you're teaching classes. So you talked about being confident, you talked about being positive. So we have taken a look at some of the principles. Tell us, there are usually in any negotiation must haves and nice to have principles because negotiation is not just about what you want, it's about what's favorable to the other party, what is the common ground that you can create between yourself and the other party so that it's a solution that's beneficial to both. So when people are sitting down, and even before they go to the negotiation table, it's like they're looking at their best options, nice to have, must haves. How did you prep before going to a negotiation?
Well, I'll tell you about the toughest guy I ever negotiated with. He had this 3 sawmills. I mean, ego, major company. I won't tell you what it is, but he would only give me 10 minutes of his time. And in that 10 minutes, I had to describe all the things I was telling you about, what inventories are here, who's doing what, what's going offshore. Blah, blah, blah. And then I would say, and that's why I'm willing to give you a $10 increase in the price. Or I got 3/5 of Johnny Walker for this one. I told all my people in our department, I'm going to get a $30 discount. And they said, nah, you'll never do it. I prepared. Where I prepared was at McDonald's in that town. I would sit there at McDonald's and I would write my list of all the things that I knew were going on. And I went, this is pushing the price up, this is pushing the price down. So I went in with him and I said, here's my list. And I want a $30 discount. Drop that price. And he went, wow, you really know your stuff. I guess we got to go it. We got to do it. So I ended up with more Johnny Walker than I ever needed.
So from what you're telling me is that preparation is very important. It's
Yeah.
important to show that you know your stuff.
And I know their stuff.
Ah,
I know how many people are working at their mill. I know if they're running 1, 2, or 3 shifts. I know where their market is. I know how many logs they have in their log yard. I know them. I've been driving around looking.
so it may be possible, like in your case, you were able to figure out what was going on with the other party. But
Right.
what if somebody is not able to figure it out? Because, well, some information may be available, some may not be available. What can people do in that situation?
I would talk to people that are in similar situations in the business. Like I would talk to the trucking companies. What do you think's going on here? I would talk to the people that run the tugboats that push the barges of chips. I would talk to them. Hey, what's going on here and there? Anything new going on that I'm missing? I was a chatterbox because you find things out. And then the other thing that I learned, and my cohorts in the department told me this immediately. When you walk in someone's office, you scan their desk because too often they'll leave their notes about what they're going to do with you right there on their desk. And so you got to look around. And that means when you have someone in your office, you better put everything off your desk. And so little tips like that, they really help. But yeah, I talk to lots of people. People in the mill. They hear what's going on with their friend down the road at the other mill. And you just got to be an information sponge.
Mm-hmm. Very relevant point. So now you've done your preparation and now you go to the table and you said that guy would only give you 10 minutes. And especially with today's social media, people's attention span is so down that I don't know if you've heard about it. Human beings' attention span is less than that of a goldfish. So, which is like around 9 seconds. So you only have like less than 9 seconds to grab their attention in that first sentence that you're using. And we'll go into the details also. So do you have any tips around the first statement, or do you advise that other people go first?
I would prefer setting the tone. And my tone is, I'm not going to chit chat and say, how are you doing? How's your family? I'm going to say, here's what I'm interested in, and here's my point, and here's what I'm looking for. What do you think? Lay it out.
Laid out. And what if other party's not ready for it?
Well, then you've got the advantage, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're nice and you show them that you've got your homework done, what are they going to do? All they can do is say, can you come back next week?
Definitely. So, okay, so you have set the tone, done the preparation, set the tone. Now you're on the table. Like, what may be the key elements, 2 or 3 key elements to bring out?
Really watch their body language,
Mhm.
watch how much stress they might be feeling. That's body language. Know if they're in a hurry. Be the observer, the incredible observer. Because if they're in a hurry, they may make a quick decision to your advantage. And if they're in too much of a hurry, then I can say, I can come back next week. I don't have to do this today. So make them feel comfortable with wherever they are. And that's most important. And there's a lot of fake comfortableness that happens. Oh, come on in my office. And then they sit me in a corner that I can't get out of. And then then they're in your face. And I just laugh. Yeah. You're not going to get me.
It's again, what we are kind of going back is to the mindset, not
Yeah.
only preparing your homework, but getting yourself mentally ready. That people may be daunting. People may try to intimidate you. People may try different tactics. And then sometimes people may not even try it. So if you're kind of going with an open mind, and as you mentioned about being an observer, it helps a lot. Now, so many things what have happened is like a lot has shifted. A lot of people have gone remote during these past 2 to 3 years. How did it impact the industry that you worked in? Is it still everything in person, or is any part of it on Zoom?
Zoom has made such a difference. Even
Mhm.
within a building, people can now connect with someone downstairs by in their own computer, and it's made such a difference. I think it takes a little of the personal feelings out of it, and so it's more. Um, it's just not as personal, and I think that's what's hard about that, because I want to feel your environment, and I want to see the real you, not the camera you, and what you're about. And I think it makes it more challenging. So you really need to do your homework, because the other person may not have been out of the office to do theirs.
Right. And I'm glad that you brought that point up, that it gets harder.
Yeah.
So with virtual, it's important to do your preparation. And sometimes it also helps to have one-on-one calls, because one
Yeah.
of the things that we do is get to know the person,
Mhm.
and then what are you looking for? What's the outcome? What's your desired outcome? So before you have the final meeting, get a gauge, get a feel of the pulse of the other party.
Right.
And that helps you prepare even in details and come up with different solutions. And rather than just going with one solution, it helps to have a couple of alternative solutions that you're willing to compromise on. So definitely great points. So Mary, you also mentioned about decision making. How does the positive mindset and decision making correlate?
Well, I think if you're looking at any decision that you have to make, you have to look at the pros and cons. So I get out a piece of paper, 2 columns, pros and cons, pros and cons. And then I say, are any of those pros unrealistic? Are any of the cons unrealistic? How can I make the right decision so that this con doesn't get me or get in my way? And so
Mhm.
it helps me develop an approach that minimizes the negative and emphasizes the positive.
Powerful. Well, fantastic. So share with the listeners where they can connect with you, and where can they find your booklet.
Oh gosh, thanks for asking. drmarymmitchell.com. And on there, it's a very simple webpage. It's only 4 pages long, but it has a whole page, because I've written 7 books, and I have 2 booklets, and it's right on there. And you'll see it because it has a scoop of vanilla ice cream on the icon.
So, how did the concept of vanilla ice cream relate to negotiation?
It was when I was writing down everything I had learned, and my mind said, this is so vanilla. It's so simple. And I thought that's a good description. And yet when I read it, it's really challenging, specific, and it really is amazing. So I don't know, plain vanilla just says, okay, you can read this. It's not that hard.
Right. It definitely makes sense. And so besides teaching classes, what's next for you?
Oh gosh, I have a prison ministry because I wrote for 7 years. I wrote a magazine article, a monthly magazine article on the power of our mind, power of positive thinking. And a man in prison for life found one of these magazines in the prison library, and he liked it, and he wrote to me, and he said, "Would this philosophy help me adjust to life without parole?" And I said, "Of course." And we've been corresponding 13 years. And he has gone from a deadly gangster to what I call a prison Buddha. And this past February, this behind me right here, this is the cover of our book, My Search for Ancient Wisdom, One Prisoner's Journey of Transformation. He has put this to such good use. He's now teaching prisoners this philosophy of power, the power of your mind, the power of positive thinking, what you believe you will achieve, all these things, Norman Vincent Peale. And I'm just so tickled with that. So I have 4 prisoners that have found me. I don't go looking for them. And I'm helping them shift their attitude, shift their, Michael, the prisoner, he said, "I'm now comfortable with life in prison. I've adjusted to it. It's what I'm meant to do because now I'm teaching others." And I thought, that's just awesome. So that's my life.
Wow, that's very powerful. And I'm so glad that you're sharing the wisdom with people and helping them transform. So thank you for joining us, Mary. And
It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Any last words for our audience?
If you put your mind to it, you can do anything.
I love that. So thank you, Mary, and thank you, audience, for joining us. Why don't we start out with that 1 hour? Just 1 hour a month, help somebody else. And also take care of yourself because it's important. You are the most important person in your life. Take good care of yourself and reach out to us with any questions, suggestions, because based on your suggestions, we bring our guests so that we are able to serve you and support you to live the life that you deserve. So thank you for being part of our family, and thank you, Juan, for making the show possible technically. Until next time, be well and take care.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you've learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who have experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.